Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome to a toasty, warm instalment of Rees Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. And indeed, the theme for this week, once more, is toasty warm, because it is very warm here in the studio. I'm a little bit later in the day. I actually went to the gym at 7:30 this morning because I wanted to avoid the worst of the heat, rather than going at 12 like I usually do, which I think was a very wise decision on my part. I was wide awake anyway because I haven't really slept over the past week. And yeah, as mentioned, of course, we have this ongoing heat wave. Although it does seem that hopefully, touch wood, over the weekend, the temperatures will start to decrease. And hopefully that's a trend that's going to continue, because we have had record June temperatures for 2 days in a row now here in the UK, 36.1 degrees C, which I am reliably informed is 97 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm not here fishing for sympathy. I know parts of mainland Europe certainly have it a lot worse than we do, particularly France and Germany. But I did find, when I was looking for that record temperature, I did find this page here on the BBC News website, and they've got one of their full-blown ongoing crisis live streaming web pages dedicated solely to the weather. Of course, one of the favourite talking points here in the UK. We're always talking about the weather and complaining about it. Next week we'll be complaining that it's either raining or not as cold as or as hot as it was this week. We've got thunderstorms, we've got red extreme heat warnings, we've had lightning, I saw one picture of someone's house that had been struck by lightning that had actually, unfortunately led to quite a severe fire. So I hope everybody's okay in that part of the world. We've also got some wildfires in Derbyshire. We are used to wildfires kind of further south in the country, where it is generally a bit hotter and a bit drier, but Derbyshire's up in the Midlands, kind of up by me, so that's quite surprising. Again, as mentioned, this lightning and stuff, and also my local railway station, Leamington Spa. I actually heard that some of the rails had warped, so there are some trains that aren't running. And yeah, they have actually advised, the Department for Transport have advised that people do not travel by rail at all during this heat wave, unless it's entirely necessary, because our trains are completely and utterly useless and the air conditioning never works, if indeed it is installed in the first place. So, yeah, great news there for the country that essentially invented rail travel. We're still doing very well at that. I don't think anyone needs to tell us that our railways are a complete and utter shambles. But anyway, you're here to hear all about retro computing and gaming, aren't you? I'm getting a bit delirious. It is very warm in here. And I do have a couple of corrections, which I would quite like to lead with from last week's Ramble. So let's very quickly talk about those before we get on with the stories for this week. So the first one that I wanted to talk about, which I very briefly touched on last week, is this new flash cart from Retro HQ, of course known for their flash carts for the Jaguar and the Atari 7800. And this is called the Polymaster Game Drive. Now, I initially thought that this was for an old console that perhaps I hadn't heard of called the Polymaster, and I kind of went down that route. It was part of a much quicker wrap-up of things that I hadn't really looked into properly in my defence. But I just wanted to clarify this, because looking into this a bit more, it's actually a really interesting project. Because afterwards I was editing the Ramble and I thought, I bet that's for the Polymega, that multi-game system with the interchangeable cartridge. It's an FPGA-based system, interchangeable like cartridge interfaces. You can run your original cartridges on it. Supports a few different consoles. I thought, actually, I've made a huge mistake here. I bet this is for the Polymega. And I made a note to actually correct that. And then I did a bit more digging and realised that this is for the Polygame Master, which is an arcade board that was released in 1997 to compete with the Neo Geo MVS. So this is the Polygame Master, and it was released by the Taiwanese company IGS in 97, as mentioned. And of course, everyone knows about the Neo Geo, but I hadn't heard of the Polygame. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that, just as quite an interesting opening for this week's Ramble. And it seems that there was a Dodonpachi game, those notorious Japanese vertical scrolling bullet hell shooters. I love the Dodonpachi games. I'm not necessarily very good at them, but I do love them. I think they are quite a spectacle. And there was actually one released on this system, Dodonpachi Dai Uju, apparently, by Cave, of course. And this is a cartridge-based arcade system, as per the Neo Geo MVS, as mentioned. So if you were running an arcade, you didn't need to change the boards themselves to change the games with the actual chips on the boards, the ROM chips containing those games, as per a lot of traditional arcade games. You could just send off for a cartridge for the latest and greatest game. And this is a competing system to the Neo Geo. So Motorola 68000, very similar specs, so 20 megahertz. We've got a Zilog Z80 sound processor. We've got the ICS 2115 32-channel PCM sound chip. There's built-in protection. We've got an ARM7 ASIC chip, which is acting as a protection chip, obviously copy protection. And it supports the hardware scrolling and zoom and shrink capabilities. All the stuff you might expect from a 1997 arcade system. There was the Polygame Master 2 as well, the follow-up, which has a completely different set of specs. We've got an IGS 036 CPU, an IGS 37 GPU, a Yamaha YMZ774S sound chip, and so on and so on. The Polygame Master 3, which is an ARM-based system released in 2015. So, we're light years ahead of its two predecessors. Screen resolutions of 720p. And all the rest of that stuff. Of course, you can go to the Wikipedia page and read that for yourself, as I have done. And there is quite the list of games released on this platform as well. I'm not sure if this is if all three systems use the same cartridge format, and the new Polygame Master cartridge from Retro HQ is going to support all three systems. I'm not quite sure. But if you are running like a retro arcade or whatever, then this is quite an interesting development. And I know these retro arcades are quite the thing. Oh, it turns out Knights of Valor 3 was the only game released for the Polygame Master 3. Anyway, there's a big list of games here. I'm not really familiar with many of these. Like I say, there was Dodonpachi, there's Dragon World games, we've got Photo Y2K, Puzzle Star, all of this stuff, Knights of Valor, The Killing Blade, Oriental Legend, all sorts of interesting sounding names. And if you want to see some of those games in action, there is actually a video over on Retro HQ's YouTube channel as well. There's a 7.5-minute video. Shows off the menu system initially, obviously loading some of these games. This is very much a work in progress. But you can see the quality of some of these games. Quite Neo Geo-esque. We've got some really nice big detailed sprites and things in these fighting games and whatnot. Yeah, once I started digging into that, it all has turned out to be very, very interesting, and I wanted to share that with you. There is another important correction as well, and this is briefly to do with the Commodore phone that I mentioned. I was actually going to make this a full-blown item in this week's Ramble, but to be honest, there's not all that much to talk about, but I do kind of want to set the record straight. So there was some speculation that this was an off-the-shelf Chinese, Commodore referred to it as a dumb phone. I'm going to call it a feature phone, although it is actually closer to a smartphone because it does run full-blown Sailfish OS. It's an old-school style flip phone. It has built-in blocking for social media. Also, apparently doesn't support the secure Android apps like banking apps and things like that, which is perhaps important to bear in mind if you are considering picking one of these up. But designed as a kind of a digital disconnect, a digital detox, an offline kind of alternative to modern smartphones. And being Commodore, people have been kind of nitpicking this and have been quite critical of it in places, which I did talk about last week. But turns out that this doesn't actually, this is actually a brand new product built from the ground up. So Commodore have actually designed their own in-house PCB for this. This is a new Commodore product, apparently, through and through. Not an existing wholesale white label Chinese feature phone with a Commodore label printed on it, as some people have suspected. So they do deserve actually a fair bit of credit for that. And that does actually, I think, help to explain the price as well, that very high price that I talked about last week. We'll just take a quick look at this. I think it was, what is this? £303 GBP. I spotted this currency drop down as well when I was looking at this earlier. So, $400 essentially if you pre-order one now. And they announced after the launch You'll note that these prices are quite a bit lower than the ones that I talked about last week. And they've actually announced since the launch and since recording last week's Ramble that they are reducing the price by $100 across all of the various different models as well, due to feedback from the community at large. So that does make it a bit of a more attractive prospect and does, of course, also help to explain that price as well, because as mentioned, this is a custom job. Haven't done much more reading into that, but I thought that was important to mention with all the negativity out there surrounding this phone. I certainly won't be buying one, but I do think it's an interesting offering, and I do want to kind of wish them all the best with it as well. It does have some interesting features. That's a high-quality digital to analog converter kind of aimed at music listeners, those built-in SID ringtones, of course, the SID chip being the sound chip in the Commodore 64. It's interesting, if nothing else, and it's also now a little bit cheaper. But anyway, with those two minor corrections under our belts, I see we're 11 minutes in already. Wonderful. Let's get on with the main stories for this week's Ramble. An interesting tale next, all about a quirk of US copyright law and its potential implications for a very long-running battle concerning the ownership of a much-loved game series. And hopefully this story will be music to the ears of my very good friend Dave from the This Week in Retro podcast. Of course, big rivals of mine, we absolutely despise each other. No, we don't really, of course. I have appeared as a guest on This Week in Retro and also as a co-host for quite a while, covering Neil for his paternity leave. And they are very good friends of mine. I do need to catch up with those guys, actually. Perhaps I'll drop a hint about wanting to appear as a guest at some point. Is that something you want to say? I think so. Anyway, Dave, quite famously, is a huge fan of the Ultima series of games, and hopefully a series that needs no introduction, but also a series that I know very little about because they've been, by and large, passed me by over the years. I have asked him for recommendations, and they have been on my to-play list for the longest time, but as is a recurring theme here on Rees Rambles, I just don't get the time to check these things out. I really should check out Ultima at some point, shouldn't I? I can hardly call myself a gamer, having never played any of them. But anyway, to the actual meat and bones of the story. Over on PC Gamer here, we have a story here by Rick Lane, and this is to do with the character, the rather interesting character, that is Richard Garriott, of course, Mr. Lord British, who indeed invented the Ultima series way back in the day, before it was acquired by EA. And he is now, again, as he has been many, many times over the years, trying to regain ownership of the copyright to the Ultima series. But this time around, he has the law on his side, and it's looking very likely that he is actually going to get the rights back finally, and perhaps potentially do something interesting with them. Who knows? I guess only time will tell. Anyway, the headline here, the creator of Ultima is reportedly reclaiming the series rights back from EA, and it could happen as soon as next year. Every decade or so, I try to work with EA on a revival of Ultima. That is a direct quote from Richard Garriott in this interview, which we will read all about right now. Ultima is one of PC gaming's most important cultural touchstones, with Richard Lord British Garriott's role-playing series blazing trails across numerous genres. The mainline CRPGs received critical acclaim for their rich, dynamic worlds, while spin-offs like Ultima Underworld and Ultima Online were key texts in the evolution of the immersive Sims and MMOs. Ultima's influence still echoes through to today, with Ultima 7 being a major inspiration for Larian Studios when developing Divinity Original Sin and Baldur's Gate 3. Yet, it's been a long time since Ultima itself was a going concern. The keys to the series have been in the pocket of Electronic Arts since 1992, when Garriott sold developer Origin Systems to the publisher. While some good Ultima games were developed afterwards, most notably Ultima Online, the series has largely been left dormant by EA, barring a couple of ill-fated experiments like 2010's Lord of Ultima and 2013's Ultima Forever. But it's possible that may soon change, as control of the series could return to Garriott in the near future. This was reportedly explained by Garriott himself to Inside Games' Brian Garr. Recently, the phrasemaker reported that EA filed new trademarks related to the Ultima series, and that prompted Garr to call Garriott to find out what, if anything, Garriott knew about this. According to Garriott stated that he has repeatedly attempted to revive Ultima while the series has been under EA's purview. Every decade or so, I tried to work with EA on a revival of Ultima. They always seemed interested enough to start talking, then abandoned talks just as quickly. Now, Garriott is reclaiming the copyright to the series back from EA. This is thanks to a rule in US copyright law which allows creators or their heirs to reclaim a copyrighted work after a period of 35 years. Since Garriott sold the Ultima rights to EA in 1992, this means he can reclaim those rights in 2027. And so, says Garriott, I have been waiting. Finally, the time has come. And the important caveat here is that he is reclaiming the copyright to Ultima, but not the trademark. So EA still owns the trademark, but Garriott, so that means that Garriott couldn't actually make a game called Ultima. But he could do something with a slightly different name, apparently, called like Lord British's Ultima, which appears to be his plan. Lord British's Ultima will regain all the copyrights of my original work, Garriott said to Inside Games. What it will become is the next challenge. That reminds me, actually, of ELO, oddly enough, Electric Light Orchestra. You know, that's Jeff Lynne's wonderful band from Birmingham. I've seen them live twice, once at Wembley Stadium. In fact, if you buy the Blu-ray to that ELO gig at Wembley Stadium, I am actually in it for about half a second during Xanadu. So, yeah, if you want to go look out for me and try and get a screen grab of that, be my guest. But yeah, of course, he rebranded the band, didn't he? It was ELO and it was Electric Light Orchestra, and now it's Jeff Lynne's ELO. And it sounds like this is going to be a very similar setup, isn't it? Lord British's Ultima. It doesn't really roll off the tongue very well, though, does it? But great news, I think, for the original creator of the series. EA have let it languish over the years and raked in the cash from the sales and licensing, merchandise and all of that stuff, but not really done much with the series. And he has been itching for decades to get his hands on it and actually do a proper relaunch, a proper reboot of the Ultima series. And who better to do it than the original creator, of course. As mentioned, quite a character in the gaming world. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does with it. I mean, perhaps this will be my chance to finally check out an Ultima game. Valve's long-anticipated PC-based console, the Steam Machine, is finally upon us, but all anyone can talk about is the price. Well, the price and the extremely limited availability. And both of these things are linked to the same underlying cause, of course. I don't think I need to spell it out, but I am going to. And there's also a very good article here from Eurogamer that does go into it in a lot more detail as well. So we'll take a look at that. But this is Valve's Steam Machine. We'll just check out their official store page. It is an AMD Zen 4 CPU-based system with an RDNA 3 GPU. It's got 16 gig of DDR5 RAM and 8 gig of GDDR6 VRAM. And there are options for 512 gig or 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs, and also some nice bundles with the new controller that Valve have released. Now, the initial feedback on these, as I say, it does seem to focus around the price and the availability, and also the availability of that controller as well. So the whole hardware world still struggling because of all of the AI tech bros buying up all of their components. Prices here, we've got £879 for the 512 gig model. That's the entry-level model. Quite pricey compared to some of the speculation that we saw on the internet, of course. £938 with the controller. Prices going all the way up to £1,208 if you buy the 2 terabyte model with the controller. But this is a standard NVMe SSD, so you can upgrade it later on if you like. I'm not quite sure what else is upgradable on this machine. Valve, I think, are quite open to people kind of hacking and messing about with it, so I wouldn't be surprised if other components were replaceable as well. I haven't really seen any teardowns and things on this as of yet. I do need to go and check those out. But as mentioned, the full story is over on Eurogamer. And this will be linked down below, of course, as per everything else I cover in this week's Ramble, as always. Valve says Steam Machine's price is significantly more than it originally envisaged, and the launch quantity is less than we wanted to be able to make. A story here by Robert Purchase over on Eurogamer. And yeah, this is a result of an interview with a couple of the guys at Valve themselves. They haven't actually said, one thing I thought was quite interesting about this story is they haven't actually said, perhaps quite wisely, the price that they were targeting when they initially announced this thing. What seems like a lifetime ago. But yeah, it's over $1,000 for the base model, or £879 here in the UK, as mentioned. And Eurogamer does compare this to the price of the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is the most expensive console on the market at the moment, which is £790. So that is around £100 less than the entry-level Steam machine. Now, of course, if you've had Steam since the early days, 25 years or however long it's been going, it's got to be getting on for that. It's got to be 20 plus years, I think. The launch of Half-Life 2. Yeah, I'm going to say 20 plus years. You've probably got quite the extensive game library, and as I've actually discovered in some of my own videos on my main channel, SteamOS is very, very good. It's actually better than modern Windows at running that back catalogue of PC games. So that's quite an interesting proposition, and of course does add quite a lot to the value of the machine. So important to bear in mind, as far as I know, the PlayStation 5 doesn't play the entire back catalogue of PlayStation games, if indeed PlayStation gamers have hung on to their original discs over the years. But yeah, back onto the story. The reason for the high price is the ongoing component shortage crisis caused by AI data center component demand. Indeed, as if predicting an explanation was required, Valve's Steam Machine announcement dived straight into this exact issue after the price was revealed, stating our original goal for the price of Steam Machine is no longer viable. Now, Valve wouldn't tell Eurogamer what the original price was, but engineer Yazan Aldahayat did say the price is significantly more. He added, it's hard because I don't think we ever really had an official price or anything like that. I think we had some ideas, but it's really difficult to quantify it. Now, the story goes on to compare this to the price of Steam's other, Steam machine, the Steam Deck, their handheld PC-based console, starts at £649. So again, that is a fair bit cheaper than the. I just need to remind myself what the price was of this thing. Was it 780, something like that? Oh, sorry, 879. So yeah, 879 for the Steam machine. Versus 649 for the 512 gig Steam Deck. Of course, that is a miniaturized system that also has an OLED screen and stuff as well. Not as capable, but yeah, something closer to that price perhaps would have been preferable. The company said it started sourcing components for Steam Machine in 2023 before the component crisis took hold. And its understanding back then was that prices would fall, an understanding born from the many years of data we have all about the evolution of PC hardware prices. I think a very fair assumption to make, but obviously that's not what's happened. So anyway, I don't want to go through and read all of this in, word for word to you. It's quite a lengthy article and does involve this interview with a couple of the Valve staff involved with the Steam machine. So it's very interesting, and I wouldn't want to take that click away from Eurogamer. So please do go and follow that link if you are interested in reading a bit more background information about the launch of the Steam machine, the pricing, the component availability, and whatnot. But one thing that I have noticed that I will say I think is very important, and something that really shows that this is a very different product to the PlayStation 5 that I talked about a moment ago, or indeed the Xbox or the Switch. Of course, Valve have their roots in the PC gaming world, and PC gaming has always been a very much DIY affair, people building their own machines, and it is a really big part of the culture. So to make something that is a kind of a pre-packaged, complete product is quite interesting. It's quite an interesting offering. But they haven't forgotten their roots because if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the store page, the official store page, if I don't get a Steam machine right away, is there anything else I can do? Thanks to the openness of the PC platform, there are lots of options for devices that will allow you to run games natively or stream to your TV. There are many PC sites and communities out there that can help you with that. For our part, we are continuing to work toward enabling SteamOS to be used on more hardware than just ours. In fact, with the newly released SteamOS 3.8, you can run the same code and operating system as the Steam machine on your own living room PC using whatever PC parts you want. And there is a link here to download it. It does mention only AMD GPUs are supported, and the word on the grapevine is that they are very, very much actively working on NVIDIA support as well. But stuff like that Geekob mini PC that I featured in my latest video on the main channel. And there are third-party offerings, third-party distributions of SteamOS. Bazite's the one that I like to use. I also have it on my big gaming PC as well. Takes all of the work that Valve did with Proton, of course, that compatibility layer for Windows games, and wraps it all up neatly in the same way that SteamOS does. But I'd just like to take a moment to just point out the kind of what a monumentally important thing this is, because this is a console, you know, it's designed to be stuck under your TV and used as a console. You use Valve's storefront, of course, Steam, to buy the games on it, as per the other consoles on the market. But they're saying, here's the information, you can go and build your own if you want, and you can have the operating system for free. Now, I know, of course, they make their money from the games, but that's also true of the console manufacturers as well. You know, they sell the hardware at a loss and they make the money back on the games. You know, the whole razor and blade kind of business model that people talk about. But could you imagine someone like Nintendo saying, well, don't worry, if you can't get your hands on a Switch 2 right now, here's a link to download the operating system and install it on your own PC. And here's where you can go to find information on that. And then you can play all of your Switch games on your own machine. I think that's quite remarkable. I mean, perhaps not considering the company behind it. I mean, this is Valve we're talking about. But as far as the console market is concerned, I think it is pretty much unheard of. I think it is something that is to be celebrated. So, yeah, the link goes to the SteamOS installation and repair page over on steampowered.com. Not going to go through this in any great detail. But, you know, at the moment, they do have kind of a list of approved devices that you can install this on. But there are also instructions out there that allow you to install it on other hardware. People have had a lot of success with that, as we have seen in various YouTube videos and things. And if you want a more polished version, or perhaps a kind of a more neatly packaged up version with some extra functionality and stuff thrown in as well, of course, we've got options like Bazite and CachyOS and stuff out there as well. So great news for Steam gamers and PC gamers as well, despite the rather unfortunate news around the launch of the Steam machine regarding the pricing and the availability. Every cloud has a silver lining. I'm still excited about this machine. Probably won't pick one up myself because I already have a smaller machine that I use for the more casual games, and indeed a much bigger and more capable one that I use for the kind of more AAA stuff, if I ever have time to play any of that kind of stuff. But it's finally here, the Steam machine. Some more news next, all about that ongoing component shortage crisis. But this one has a bit of a vintage computing angle to it. And I must say, when I saw this come through, it did really tickle me. And I think it will amuse some others in the vintage PC community as well. Because, as you may know, I have quite the extensive collection of vintage PC hardware, going all the way back to the original IBM PC from 1981 and kind of spanning the 80s and the 90s, but particularly focusing on the turn of the century kind of era, the late 90s, early 2000s. That was when I was really kind of coming of age in the world of PC gaming and starting to build my own hardware and stuff. And it is the era that particularly interests me. And if you also own a lot of hardware from this era, you may well be sitting on a gold mine. I'm going to have to go through my big box of RAM here and get some of this stuff listed on eBay because it's back in demand, and it's all because of the component shortage. Allow me to explain. So this is a story over on techpowerup.com. Consumer DRAM shortages extend to DDR2 products, with contract prices expected to continue rising in the third quarter of 2026. Now, of course, people aren't talking about buying up all of your old RAM. That is a bit of a joke. But DDR2 is still being manufactured, as plenty of legitimate uses for it out there as a lower cost source of RAM for various devices. And it has also been hit by the component shortages. So there we go. TrendForce's latest research reveals that structural tightening in mature node DRAM supply is forcing consumer DRAM buyers to adopt legacy memory products to secure larger supply allocations. This has triggered a new wave of demand for procuring older generation DRAM components, driving continued price momentum across legacy products such as DDR2 and DDR3. Following strong gains in first quarter 2026, TrendForce estimates DDR2 contract prices will rise by approximately 55 to 60% in the second quarter, followed by a further 35 to 40% increase in the third quarter. TrendForce notes that on the supply side, the three major DRAM suppliers continue to prioritize advanced node production to support growing demand for HBM and server DRAM, driven by AI infrastructure investments. As a result, wafer allocations for DDR4 and other mature node products have been reduced, forcing buyers of consumer DRAM, such as DDR4, to seek support from Taiwanese DRAM suppliers. Companies such as Nanya and Winbond, two names that I am familiar with, have gained substantial pricing leverage as demand significantly exceeds the bit output available from Taiwanese vendors. Given limited supply, these suppliers have strategically reduced production of lower margin products and shifted capacity toward higher value offerings to improve profitability. And it just goes on to talk about how some OEMs are actually downgrading their memory specifications to control their system costs. Thankfully, Valve didn't do that and put DDR2 in the Steam machine. And DDR4 designs are being replaced with DDR3 solutions, while certain DDR3 products are being redesigned to use DDR2. Customers are aiming to secure more reliable supply allocations by adopting lower capacity configurations or older memory generations. Consequently, supply shortages in consumer DRAM are cascading down through successive technology generations. Winbond is actually in the process of exiting DDR2 production, which is apparently exacerbating this problem. And they're reallocating capacity towards DDR3, DDR4, and LPDDR4, and that's tightening DDR2 supply conditions further. But in contrast, ESMT are maximizing DDR2 production within its existing wafer allocations, concentrating resources on this segment to enhance profitability and help offset the supply gap created by Winbond's withdrawal from the DDR2 market. So the story here isn't that the people building these AI data centers are suddenly buying up DDR2 and DDR3 RAM from 20 years ago because that's all they can get their hands on. The story here is that the RAM manufacturers are shifting their production to away from this older technology and more towards the newer technology because, of course, it is far more profitable and far more in demand. But the people that legitimately need those older RAM technologies are now suffering as a result of this, as a knock-on effect of everything that's going on in the AI data center world. And we're not talking about end users here. We're not talking about people wanting to go out and buy a brand new RAM for their Pentium 4 or whatever. We're talking about people making these integrated systems that are kind of PC based but lower end. Of course, 486 CPUs are still manufactured for some embedded purposes, and they use even older RAM technology than this. So perhaps no surprise that this is in quite widespread use behind the scenes. But hey, perhaps all of us in the vintage computing community should club together. You know, we could get our hot air guns out and perhaps remove all of the DRAM chips from our old school memory modules and offer those for sale to some of these people. I mean, you know, prices increasing as they are, 55 to 60% in the second quarter, 35 to 40% on top of that next quarter. There's quite a lot of money to potentially be made. Is that a serious suggestion? I don't even know anymore. Now, one thing that I have talked about rather a lot over the years in Rees Rambles is my love for all things Sega. And indeed, I'm sure a lot of you out there are massive Sega fans too. Really important brand and have produced some iconic games over the years as well. I don't think anyone would argue against that. And nary a week goes by on Rees Rambles when I don't have a Sega-related story. And this week is no exception. No, I'm not talking about the Sonic comic scanning and upscaling scandal, AI upscaling, that has been doing the rounds on social media this week. I don't really want to dip my oar in with that one and get involved with that whole debate. I want to stick to some happier news because This does involve Sonic, but this is the original game where indeed my love affair for Sega actually started all those years ago. My auntie and uncle bought a Mega Drive for my cousins, and it had Sonic the Hedgehog. I think they had a few other games. Was it World Cup Italia 90 and Columns? They had that 3-in-1 game cartridge and a couple of other things, I think. But the game that really blew me away at the time was Sonic. Coming from the Atari ST, which, don't get me wrong, did have some very good platformers in its own right. The Mega Drive, and just seeing the speed and the colours and the spectacle that was Sonic the Hedgehog really blew me away. I think blew a lot of people away at the time. So cool to see it being honoured here with an official re-release from I Am 8-Bit. This is a re-release of the original cartridges. When I say re-release, they have been pimped out, as you might expect, for the 21st century, with some rather cool touches. So we have Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, indeed, as mentioned, from I Am 8-Bit, available over on iam8bit.com. We'll be linked down below, as always. So let's take a look at this cartridge first, the original Sonic the Hedgehog. It is a playable Sega Genesis compatible cartridge. It does work in the original console. It is compatible with NTSC consoles. I just want to point out, of course, that region mod, very, very easy to do on the original hardware. And of course, we've got some of the FPGA-based solutions that are very easily region switchable as well. So I don't think that's too much of a limitation. The one thing I will also say is that the PAL version of Sonic the Hedgehog did run slower because of the 50 hertz, 60 hertz difference. And a lot of people do consider it to be inferior for that reason. The music running slower and the gameplay running a bit slower. Of course, it's all I knew back in the day. So I think I actually prefer the feel of the 50 hertz PAL version, but that is what it is. Anyway, I've been sidetracked by region stuff. We've got a translucent blue blur cartridge shell, which looks very cool indeed. We've got the nostalgic blue clamshell packaging with premium foil embellishments. Oh, I wonder what that means. A full colour premium instruction booklet with restored artwork and an all-new foreword. We've got some retro packing surprises. We've got a custom package design and restoration, which has been done by Django Snow Art and Design. 1 in 8 cartridges are infused with Chaos Emerald energy. What does that even mean? I mean, I can see there's a glowing cartridge on the picture here. Is that the infused with Chaos Emerald energy that we're talking? Look at that poster. My goodness. And the instruction booklet and stuff. I mean, the packaging itself is just very nostalgic. I see there's 2 different cartridge variants, and it looks like one of them is a limited edition that they're going to be slipping into 1 of 8, every 1 in 8 of those packages. That's quite a nice touch, isn't it? Although perhaps not so nice for the people who want to set out to collect both variants. It's $99, I will say, which you can pre-order from iam8bit.com. This is shipping in Q3 this year, the first wave shipping in Q3. There's a second wave shipping in Q4, and the remaining orders will be Q1 of next year. There's a bit of an introduction here to Sonic the Hedgehog, which I don't think we really need to go over, do we? I think everyone watching this or listening to this is probably familiar with Sonic by this point. And anyway, so now 35 years later, I Am 8-Bit and Sega are teaming up to celebrate Sonic's massive impact on gaming with a once-in-a-lifetime commemoration. This is the Sonic the Hedgehog 35th Anniversary Legacy cartridge, meticulously crafted, fully playable release of the legend that started it all. Comes in a gorgeous translucent blue blur cartridge shell, packed in a fold-out foil box adorned with embellishments. And you'll find a full-colour premium instruction booklet inside, the same kind you'd crack open and pour over on the ride home from the store. It does talk a little bit about the cartridges. So the 1 in 8 Chaos Emerald cartridges feature a unique translucent exterior housing a Chaos Emerald inner glow. How interesting. $99, first wave shipping Q3, second wave Q4, third wave Q1 next year. And as mentioned, this doesn't just include the original Sonic the Hedgehog. No, we have the sequel as well, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which many people consider to be the better game. Of course, we've got Tails in there as well as a playable character. And I don't know. I haven't really played all that much of Sonic 2. It was all about Sonic 1 back in the day, but we've got the translucent cartridge shell again, which is orange in this case, of course, because of Tails. We've got the premium instruction booklet and all of the same stuff going on with the manual redesign and everything else. The retro pack-in surprises, and again, 1 in 8 cartridges with the Chaos Emerald Energy. Translucent glowing cartridges to be collected. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I'm not going to go over all the details again because they are much of a muchness as a set. I'm sure collectors will probably want to pick up both, and maybe this is an indication that the other games in the series will be getting similar treatment. I think the next one was Sonic and Knuckles that had the pass-through, so you could plug cartridges into the top of it. Was that one? I think the Mega Drive had pretty much passed me by that point, but cool news for Sonic fans, I guess, and collectors of these rather nicely packaged reissues. That's the Sonic the Hedgehog 35th Anniversary Legacy Cartridge Collection from I Am 8-Bit, $99.99, Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, with those rare Chaos Emerald glowing cartridges to look out for as well. Looks like a cool project. My goodness, it is warm here in the studio today. Yeah, just checking out my monitor up in the corner of the room there. I can see how shiny and sweaty my face is. So, yeah, I think a big apology is in order for those of you out there watching this in 4K on your TVs or perhaps your higher-end, bigger laptop screens. I do apologise. Now is probably the time to turn the video off and listen to the podcast instead. But the show must go on, hopefully for not too much longer. This is a story that I do want to cover, though, although it doesn't really have a retro or vintage angle, but it is quite important to those of you out there because this is Windows 10, which was released all the way back in 2015. Perhaps that does make it vintage, actually. I'm not quite sure. I'm getting a bit delirious here. And which, of course, a lot of people are desperately clinging onto on their home PCs for various reasons. Perhaps ethical concerns around the AI integration, the Copilot stuff that was integrated into Windows 11. Of course, Microsoft have pushed some of that out to Windows 10, and they have also announced that they are rolling back on some of that as well in recent weeks and months. So perhaps that's good news. Also, perhaps more importantly, hardware support, stuff like driver support, the TPM requirements for Windows 11, older CPU instructions no longer supported. And although there were workarounds for a lot of those things, which I did show in some videos on my channel, I installed Windows 11 on Pentium 4 at one point, they have now become hard requirements in the OS itself, meaning that those workarounds are no longer viable. So an awful lot of people out there on Windows 10. A lot of hardware still doing its job very, very capably and staying out of landfill, out of e-waste, thanks to those people still running Windows 10 on those machines. Perhaps Linux isn't viable. Perhaps there's some application or something that they run on there that's not supported, or I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of valid reasons. Now, there are workarounds, and I'm not going to detail those here. Stuff like upgrading your home installation of Windows 10 to one of the enterprise editions with the long-term support, the security updates and things, which will mean that it will be supported for many years to come. They have been ably covered by channels such as Michael MJD, and I have talked about those in the past as well. So please go and do your own research if you are interested in that. But all of that is to say that there has been quite an important announcement this week from Microsoft for those Windows 10 holdouts. And it's good news, actually. It's very good news because basically they have another year. So let's go to x.com, Windows latest. This is just what was linked on my Discord. And to be honest, I'm losing the will to live here, so I'm not going to research any other sources. But Windows latest breaking. Microsoft just shared an official statement confirming Windows 10 support has been extended for another year and explained why it's giving users more time. Windows 10 Extended Security Update Program for personal use devices is being provided for an additional year, with coverage now available through October the 12th, 2027, Microsoft told Windows latest. This extension provides customers with more time to transition to a new Windows 11 PC while continuing to receive critical security updates. This is an interesting move, and it gives Microsoft more time to work on Windows 11, which is finally moving in the right direction. So, there we go. If you are running Windows 10 and you are covered by that Extended Security Updates program, as you should be, rather than going to one of the enterprise solutions, perhaps, and you were perhaps considering your options with that October deadline starting to loom for the end of those security updates, you can breathe easy for another year. It's now October the 12th, 2027 for ESU, and good news for Windows 10 users. Finally. And that's, my dearest ramblers, that brings us around rather sweatily to my regular Videos of the Week feature, wherein I feature a video, or indeed videos, that have entertained, educated, enlightened, or otherwise improved my life in some small way here on the old YouTubes in the past week. Now, I have done this previously, and I'm going to do this to you again because I've been extremely busy with work during the day, and I've been not wanting to sit around watching YouTube videos in the evenings over the past week due to the ongoing heat wave. Did I mention there's a heat wave here in the UK? I'm not sure if I mentioned that. But I have had some people submit some videos to my Discord, and all of these are in my watch later list, and I am going to be watching these. But I thought I would make you aware of them because these have been approved, endorsed, and recommended by my very own community. And that's got to be better than an endorsement from me, surely. I mean, they're all much smarter than me. So let us begin. Now, this one I have actually watched, I will say. This is the one on the list that I have watched. And this is MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer, and his review of the Superstation 1, which is Taki Udon's FPGA-based PlayStation console, or indeed styled after the PS1. It is the Mister platform, essentially, so it runs all of the Mister cores. I think that is quite important to note. And he also has the Super Dock for this as well, which hasn't really been seen all that much in the wild up until this point. This is the optical drive for the Superstation 1 that actually allows you to use your original PlayStation discs with the Mister core, which is quite an exciting development. And he has reviewed this, but has come up with quite a few complaints and quite a few issues, which I think has surprised a lot of people in the community because it doesn't really seem very characteristic of MVG, and he is, of course, quite well known for being a huge Mister fan. Ultimately, what this is a Mister system that adds support for optical media, and also has a really nice selection of analog video and audio outputs on it as well, which are quite expensive options if you want to add them to a traditional Mister stack. So not only perhaps one of the best ways to play PlayStation games using FPGA, but one of the best ways to play all of those old console and computer games as well. So I wasn't quite sure what to make of this review, but it is what it is. You know, it's the first hands-on review, one of the very first ones out in the wild from quite a big and well-known and respected YouTuber. So it is worth a watch, and he does, to be fair, have quite a bit of positive stuff to say as well. But one thing that he did seem to focus on was the flimsiness of the optical drive, the laptop optical drive used in that Super Dock add-on. And Taki Udon has actually responded on X, on Twitter, with a video of his own, which is him waving the Super Dock around using the actual drive itself, just to try and prove how sturdy it is. Of course, this is an off-the-shelf, commercially available laptop CD or DVD drive, I guess. This isn't a piece of hardware that he's actually designed himself. I don't even know if that would be feasible. So I think that puts that particular argument to bed. But yeah, MVG's review of the Superstation 1, very interesting for those of us who have been following along with the project over the past couple of years, and nice to see it kind of getting into the hands of someone we know. So I thought that one was worth pointing out, and indeed I have watched that one. Now, the next video on my list was suggested by a member of my community. Apologies, I didn't catch your name. But this is Wii U games running from a 1980s Bernouilli disc. Now, I found this interesting because I've only ever read about Bernouilli discs. You know, they're kind of a predecessor to the zip disk, if you like. And but yeah, they were around in the 1980s, and huge, great, hefty bits of hardware. And essentially, what this channel is doing, will it work with their 7,950 subscribers? So if you do enjoy the video, please do subscribe to their channel. You know what? I'm going to preemptively subscribe there. Always tough to grow a channel in this day and age. But yeah, from what I've seen, the couple of snippets of this that I did look at when I was kind of flicking through earlier, really nice historical information about the history of the Bernui disc format, which again is something I've never seen in real life, and how that works, and actually hooking this up to be able to load modern games from this antiquated, very much dead disc format from the 1980s. So, very cool looking video, 11 minutes long. Looks like it's going to be a good watch, and indeed it is on my watch later list and linked down below in my videos of the week section in the description. So, learn a bit of history, see someone do something interesting with a bit of hardware. That's always good. The next video that I have for you is from Kim Justice. I love Kim Justice. I've been watching Kim's stuff for years and years now, and indeed has been an inspiration to my own channel as well. Another fantastic in-depth documentary, as you might expect from this channel, and this is all about the story of the Amstrad GX4000. It is 50 minutes long, this documentary, as you would expect from Kim, and absolutely jam-packed with history, all sorts of game footage, old ad footage, and all sorts of kind of first and second-hand information about this rather rare and interesting British console, of course, from Sir Alan Sugar, presenter of the UK's version of The Apprentice, his famous company, Amstrad, and, they were the Amstrad CPC machines back in the day, those very capable and quite actually highly regarded by history 8-bit machines. Very reasonably priced and, quite capable at graphics and sound for what they were. And the GX4000 was essentially a consoleized version of those that used cartridges. Very much a flop, very much a very interesting period in history, but much loved by its community and indeed the Amstrad community at large. And quite an interesting system in its own right as far as the history of consoles is concerned. So looking forward to sitting down and watching a 50-minute documentary on that from Kim Justice. I know it's going to be great, one of my favourite channels and one that is consistently high quality. So that is that. The next video that I have for you is an update on the Neo Geo Doom that we've been talking about. Shout out to the Doom Shrine behind me, my collection of Doom-related releases and paraphernalia, as always, of course. And this is another one of these ongoing attempts to actually get Doom running on the Neo Geo. Of course, I talked a moment ago about MVG. And it was him who kind of laid down the gauntlet a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember in my video of the week a few weeks ago, he was talking about how Doom wouldn't have been possible on that particular platform due to the limitations of the hardware. And then within a week, people got Doom, or at least Doom-like things, up and running on the Neo Geo. And this is kind of another update on one of those projects from a few days ago. As you can see, it's very fast, it's very fluid, it is recognisably Doom, but it is also very, very low resolution, the textures and things. But of course, very much a work in progress, and cool to see people tackling this technical challenge, and that this is still very much an ongoing thing. So this is from Duke Nukem, Doom 64KB. I believe I talked about this project last week as well, and there is a link to the GitHub in the video description if you want to check out the latest version of that. Like I say, looks fast, looks fluid, looks somewhat playable, but I think quite limited by the resolution there. Work is still ongoing. And finally, I have another video, which is actually, this is something that I've run into myself quite recently. Some issues with HDR on a TV, and particular sources being very, very dark to the point of being unwatchable. And HDR is this kind of very problematic thing as far as colour reproduction and stuff and brightness on modern TVs is concerned. It's been quite a tough nut to crack. When it works, it's incredibly impressive, but when it doesn't, it's not great. And what this is a documentary from a channel called Slidebean. I say a documentary because it's half an hour long, and it actually starts with the history of kind of colour reproduction on TVs and why that has historically been a challenge and how that has kind of evolved over the years and evolved into HDR, high dynamic range, which we have now. It looks like a really well-produced video, but again, I haven't actually watched this yet, but I think this will be of a lot of interest to people because, of course, there's a lot of talk of using HDR and indeed support for this already on some platforms out there to kind of emulate the look of CRTs and things in the past and the look of that phosphor beam, the very unique way that CRTs actually illuminated the screen and how that's kind of lost with modern flat panel displays. But we are getting some really, really good shaders on the likes of Mister and some emulators and things that are allowing us to replicate that using HDR. I am intrigued as to how HDR actually works and the story behind it. It's not something I've ever really thought about before, but now I know that there's a half an hour long video on it, I am actually going to watch this and learn everything that I can. And yeah, from what I've seen, just having a quick scrub through before sitting down to record, it does look like a great video. So yeah, why we still haven't solved HDR from Slidebean. And all of those videos will be linked down below in the description. There is a videos of the week section, as always, as I usually do with these rambles. So just a quick recap of those. We've got MVG's review of the Superstation 1 and the SuperDock add-on for that. Taki Udon's PS1-based FPGA Mister console, much anticipated and indeed by myself as well. We have the second video of the week, which is running Wii U games from a Bernui disc, a dead 1980s storage format that never really took off in the first place, but also some really interesting historical information on that format. So it looks like that's well worth a watch. I have the documentary from Kim Justice on the Amstrad GX4000 console with very much of a cult following and one that I am intrigued to learn a bit more about. We've got an update on the Neo Geo Doom porting efforts via the Doom 64KB project from Duke Nukem, and indeed a download link from that where you can go and check that out yourself in a Neo Geo emulator or indeed the Neo Geo Core on the Mister. And finally, why we still haven't solved HDR, the high dynamic range, from Slidebean, a channel that I hadn't come across before, but yeah, looks like a very interesting technical video about a modern technology that I think is highly relevant to those of us in the retro gaming and computing community. But that's all I have for you for this week's ramble. So thank you ever so much for joining me once more. I am sweating buckets here and I am actually really struggling to focus at the moment. So I'm going to call it a day with this week's ramble. Normal service shall resume next week, and I'll talk a bit about that after my final story for this week. Because, again, sadly, we're going to have to end on a rather unfortunate and rather unhappy note. Of course, we lost Bobby Prince last week, the composer of the music for Doom and many other well-liked games in the FPS genre particularly, but also many other fantastic games over the years. And this week, we've also lost another big name and another great in the gaming industry. So, story here on Routers.com. Ubisoft's co-founder, Claude Guillemot, dies in a plane crash. Guillemot, of course, being quite a difficult surname for English speakers to pronounce, so apologies if that's not quite right. But yeah, in a plane crash. Claude Guillemot, who co-founded French video game publisher Ubisoft with his brothers in 1986, has died, the company said on Saturday. Ubisoft was deeply saddened to learn of the death of Claude Guillemot, co-founder of the group and chairman of Guillemot Corp, in an accident. Our thoughts are with his family and loved ones during this difficult time. No further statements will be made at this time. So it goes on with a bit more detail. He was 69 years old and the plane crash was in Le Bourg, which is a resort town on France's Atlantic coast, and was indeed scheduled to host an air show this weekend, apparently. I'm not quite sure if he was participating in that, perhaps the warm-up for that. He was one of two people on board a twin-engine Cessna 421, and both passengers unfortunately lost their lives in the incident. So yeah, thoughts to friends, family, colleagues and everyone else connected to that. Very sad news in the gaming world once more. But as said, that is all I have for you for this week's ramble. So thank you ever so much for joining me once more. These rambles, as we know, go out at 2 minutes to midnight UK time, both on YouTube, my second channel, youtube.com/Rees Rambles, and also on the podcast platforms as well, if you want to listen to this in audio format. I have recently made some improvements to my audio workflow, and it seems that actually the feedback from that is quite positive. So thank you to everyone who has given me feedback on that. But that's all I got. So thanks once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.